A tiger, bleeding, unconscious, and dangling upside down from a wire snare in the foggy woods of North Carolina. No one should have found him, and yet someone did. But it wasn't a man. It was a silverback gorilla named Sage who refused to walk away. What followed wasn't just a rescue, it was a moment that changed the forest forever. Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you're from in the comments? And if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move you, please give this video a like and consider subscribing. Early spring morning. Appalachian Mountains. North Carolina. Dense fog. Cool air. Pine-covered slopes. The fog had arrived before the light. Thick, low, and pale as breath on glass. It curled between the pine trunks of the Appalachian forest like a living thing. The wind barely stirred, and the trees, tall and unmoving, stood like watchful giants above the earth still moist from last night's drizzle. In this quiet, with birds hesitant to sing and every footstep muffled in moss, something strange stirred. Owen Barrett stepped out of his small ranger cabin, tugging his hood over his head. The 38-year-old ranger had the look of someone more comfortable among trees than men, tall, broad-shouldered, with weather-lined skin and quiet eyes the color of river stone. After a decade working in wildlife rescue across multiple states, Owen had settled near Waynesville, North Carolina, where he oversaw a protected stretch of forest once plagued by poachers. He didn't talk much about why he left Arizona, but those who knew him said it had something to do with smoke, sirens, and the kind of silence that follows loss. He was halfway through his first thermos of coffee when he heard it, an odd rustling in the distance. Not the rustle of deer, nor the familiar crackle of raccoons or turkeys rooting through leaves. This was heavier, coordinated, purposeful. He left the path and moved quietly through the woods, eyes alert, and then he saw them. A troop of gorillas, his gorillas, moving through the mist. The Silver Pine Troop, relocated from Florida after the closure of a scandal-ridden private research facility. Normally, they stayed deeper in the eastern basin, far from the ranger trails. But this morning, they were here. At the front of the group was Sage, their alpha male, nearly 6 feet tall when upright. Sage was a powerful lowland silverback with a wide chest and a pale streak of silver across his back. The most distinctive feature, however, was the small scar above his right brow, a reminder of the tranquilizer mishap during his first relocation. It was Owen who had stayed beside Sage in those critical nights after the incident, and something unspoken had passed between them. Sage wasn't tame, but he trusted Owen in the way only wild things sometimes do, quietly, warily, and completely. Now, Sage walked right up to him and let out a low, breathy grunt. Sage Owen whispered, brow furrowing. The silverback reached out, not aggressively, but slowly, and touched Owen's sleeve. Then, with a deep glance into the trees, he turned and walked a few paces, looked back. It wasn't normal, it wasn't random. Owen knew when a wild creature was trying to show him something. He followed. They moved together, Owen and the troop, weaving through wet brush and the pale ghosts of pine trunks. The fog grew heavier the deeper they went, swallowing sound, softening every step. Then Sage stopped. The clearing wasn't large, just a break in the trees where the fog pooled like spilled milk. And there, hanging grotesquely from a thick, low branch, was a young Bengal tiger, suspended by its hind leg from a wire snare. The tiger's fur was slick with blood. Its breathing came in shallow, ragged bursts. Its leg was twisted unnaturally, the wire biting into flesh. Beneath it, the troop of gorillas had already gathered. Forming a loose circle, they made soft, uneasy vocalizations, low hums, small whines. sounds Owen had never heard from them before. His stomach clenched. How had a tiger ended up here? Snares like this weren't legal, not in this part of North Carolina, not anywhere near this sanctuary. And then, just past the edge of the clearing, a small shape appeared in the mist. A girl, 10 years old, thin frame, light brown hair tangled under a wool beanie. She wore an oversized navy raincoat and faded jeans streaked with mud. She froze the moment she saw the gorillas. Harper Allen. Owen knew the name. Harper lived with her grandmother in a farmhouse a half-mile down the ridge. Locals said she hadn't spoken much since the accident, one that took both her parents. She wandered the forest sometimes, drew pictures, watched the troop from afar but never dared approach. Now, standing a dozen feet away, Harper's eyes locked on Sage, her small fingers curled tightly into her jacket. "It's okay," Owen said softly, lifting a hand. "They won't hurt you." She didn't speak, just watched. Sage turned his head slowly, then sat down near the tiger, eyes never leaving the wounded animal. Harper's breath quickened, but her feet didn't move. Then, tentatively, she stepped forward, just one small step into the mist. Her eyes flicked to the tiger, then to the troop, then to Owen. And for the first time, she didn't turn and run. She stayed. The morning after the rescue, the fog had lifted from the Appalachian woods, leaving behind a gentle chill and sunlight that spilled like honey through the pines. The scent of damp bark and fresh moss lingered in the air as the ranger station stirred awake. Located on the edge of the protected zone, the station was a weathered wooden building with wraparound porches, a modest wildlife infirmary, and a small visitor cabin rarely used but always ready. Inside the makeshift infirmary, a low, rhythmic breathing filled the room. The young Bengal tiger lay in a thick wooden enclosure, carefully constructed from cedar planks and reinforced wire. He was curled awkwardly, hind leg bound in clean bandages. The wound had been deep, muscle torn, skin mangled, but stable for now. Dried blood still clung to the edges of his fur. Owen stood near the enclosure, scribbling updates on a clipboard. His flannel sleeves were rolled up, revealing strong forearms scarred from past rescues. The tranquilizer dart had worn off. The tiger stirred occasionally but never growled. There was pain in the animal's golden eyes. Pain. And something more. A haunted confusion. A quiet question. Why Owen had spent the better part of the night treating him. They had decided to name the tiger Theo, after an old Cherokee term meaning gift. It was fitting. The creature's presence in this sanctuary was a mystery and a warning. The door creaked behind him. Sage stepped in. Or, more precisely, Sage pushed open the infirmary's back screen door and sat just outside the threshold. He didn't enter. He never did, but he watched, his wide, dark eyes locked on Theo's bandaged leg. Then, slowly, Sage reached out and placed something on the step. A ripe pear. It rolled once and came to a stop near the threshold. Sage made a low, rumbling noise and waited. "Is that for him?" Owen asked aloud. Sage didn't respond. But he didn't leave either. Over the next hour, the rest of the Silver Pine troop appeared. They didn't crowd or fuss. They sat quietly near the infirmary's porch, in a semicircle. Occasionally glancing in, they brought more: leaves, fruit, wildflowers, offerings. Owen watched in quiet awe. In all his years, he had never seen interspecies behavior like this. By mid-afternoon, Theo had lifted his head, just slightly. His eyes flicked toward Sage, then toward the pile of fruits near the threshold. He made no sound, no snarl, just silence. And that was when Harper arrived. She didn't knock, she rarely did. She walked up the back trail, a spiral-bound sketchbook tucked under her arm and her boots muddy from the hike. Her oversized raincoat flapped slightly in the wind. Owen looked up from a pot of warming herbal salve. "You came back." She gave a small nod, eyes drifting from Sage to Theo, then to the fruit offerings. "Did you sleep all right?" Owen asked, gently. No reply, but she walked over to the steps where Sage sat and lowered herself beside him. Then, slowly, she opened the sketchbook. The first drawing was rough but unmistakable. Sage's face, his fur dark and lined, eyes large and gentle. Next was Theo, suspended upside down, leg tangled in cruel wire. She flipped the page to a drawing of the scene today, Sage placing the pair. "Those are really good," Owen murmured, crouching beside her. Harper said nothing, but her lips pressed together. A shadow passed her expression. Then, she turned the page again. This one had no animals, only a crumpled car, 2 empty seats, and a girl in the back with a line drawn across her mouth. Owen's heart thudded. He looked up at her. Was that the accident? Harper finally nodded. Then she pointed at the girl in the drawing. Her finger trembled. "I," she began, but the word caught. She tried again. "I saw them, in the glass." Her voice was a whisper, barely more than the wind, but it was there. Owen knelt beside her and waited. He didn't interrupt. He didn't press. Harper took a breath. "I saw them in the window, before it flipped. I think they knew." Her voice cracked. They were smiling. Then she stopped, closed the sketchbook, hugged it to her chest. Owen placed a hand on the porch floor near her, not touching her, just close. "Thank you for telling me." Sage let out a soft chuff, shifting his weight. Harper turned to him. For the first time, she smiled, barely, but real. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge and the pines turned gold, Owen returned to Theo's side. The tiger was more alert now, his breathing even, his tail twitching slightly. A pair, one of Sage's, had been nudged closer to the enclosure. Its skin had a single bite mark. Owen chuckled under his breath. "Guess you're not above fruit, huh?" Outside the station, the troop lingered until dusk. Then, one by one, they retreated into the trees, except Sage. The silverback stayed, posted just outside the infirmary, a quiet guardian under the dying light. Inside, Theo shifted and let out a low sigh. Outside, Harper sat beside Sage, sketching again. The days grew longer as April settled across the Appalachians, warming the forest with soft breezes and golden sunlight that filtered through pine needles like scattered hope. At the ranger station, spring's slow thaw seemed to mirror the pace of healing within its walls. Theo, the young Bengal tiger, had begun to recover. His once labored breaths now came smoother, his appetite slowly returning. His injured leg remained stiff, bound in clean bandages, but he could lift his head now, shift his weight, and let out low. Steady huffs that no longer sounded like pain, but presence. There was life in his eyes again, and there was trust. It started subtly, just a glance toward Sage through the enclosure bars. Then one morning, Theo nudged his head closer to the side of the enclosure and pressed it against the slats where Sage sat. No snarl, no tension, just quiet, deliberate contact. Sage didn't move for several moments. Then, slowly, he leaned forward and returned the gesture, pressing his heavy brow to the same spot from the opposite side. It was a touch between worlds, fur against fur, wild against wild. No one watching quite believed it. Dr. Elise Rowan, who had arrived 2 days earlier from Asheville's Wildlife Behavior Institute, was one of those watching. a tall, lean woman in her mid-40s. Elise had sharp cheekbones, steel gray hair tied tightly back, and a demeanor that danced somewhere between military precision and deep maternal warmth. Her life's work had been understanding animal communication. Years ago, she'd lost a sibling to an animal attack during a safari in Tanzania, and that grief turned into purpose. She didn't fear predators. She respected them. Now, she stood frozen outside the enclosure, notebook in hand, lips slightly parted. "I've never seen anything like this," she whispered. Owen stood beside her, arms crossed over his chest. "Neither have I. And there's no conditioning involved, no. No training, no reinforcement, just Sage being Sage." Dr. Rowan scribbled furiously. "This isn't just tolerance. This is bond inside the enclosure." Theo had now laid his massive head fully against the slats. Sage sat like a stone, his wide back still, his eyes half-lidded. Two of the younger gorillas, a curious juvenile named Pepper and a twitchy, lanky one named Bristle, approached tentatively from behind. Sage turned and gave a single, guttural warning sound. The message was clear. "Not now. This one's under my watch." The younger gorillas backed off immediately. Later that afternoon, Harper returned to the station. She had made it her new routine after school. She would walk the winding trail behind her grandmother's cabin and arrive, silent as smoke, sketchbook tucked under her arm, pockets filled with river pebbles or small pine cones she collected along the way. Today, she wore a green fleece and had tucked a pencil behind her ear. Her hair was less tangled now. Her grandmother must have braided it that morning, as always. She headed straight to the porch steps beside Sage, but today, instead of sitting, she stood and looked through the slats at Theo. The tiger was watching her. His ears twitched. She stepped closer. Sage didn't stop her. After a long pause, Harper spoke. "Thank you." "Sage," she whispered, voice barely above a breath. It wasn't much, but it was everything. Owen had stepped out from the side shed just in time to hear it. He paused mid-step, not wanting to break the moment. It was the first time she had spoken in front of anyone other than a whisper in the mist 2 days ago. Sage blinked slowly. Harper crouched, pencil in hand, and began to draw again. This time, not just Sage or Theo, but the space between them. A connection, an understanding. She drew their foreheads nearly touching, and between them, a single unbroken line of light. That evening, Dr. Rowan asked Harper if she would mind showing her the drawings. Harper didn't answer, but after a few heartbeats, she handed her the sketchbook. Elise sat on the porch with it in her lap for almost an hour, flipping slowly, thoughtfully. "These are extraordinary," she said. "You don't just see the animals. You see their feelings." Harper didn't answer, but she smiled, a small, unpracticed curve of her lips. That night, under a violet sky. Owen stayed late near Theo's enclosure. He watched as Sage settled beside the wooden frame once again, just as he had every night. A soft breeze rustled the pine needles, and fireflies blinked in the distance like stars that had fallen too close. Inside, Theo was asleep, his great body rising and falling steadily. He no longer flinched in his dreams. Owen leaned back against the rail, arms crossed. "You really don't fear those stripes, do you?" Sage gave no reply, but the calm in his posture was answer enough. There, under the pines and fading stars, the forest held its breath, not in fear, but reverence, a tiger and a gorilla, brought together by fate and wire, now healed by something older than instinct, something unspoken but undeniable. The winds shifted the night before the trouble came. Clouds gathered in silence, blotting out the moon above the Appalachian ridges. Trees creaked in the hush, and the forest turned inward as if bracing for something. At the ranger station, lights glowed faintly through misted windows, and the soft hum of a portable heater mingled with the shallow breaths of a resting tiger. Inside the infirmary, Theo slept fitfully, his leg healing but still stiff. His once bright fur had grown dull in places, his body thinner from the weeks of recovery. But he was alive, more than that. He was watched over. Sage, the silverback, remained his constant shadow, settled outside the enclosure with the patience of stone. Each night, the gorilla posted himself in near silence, eyes scanning every flicker in the woods, every change in sound, and that night, something did change. Harper lay curled in a cot in the side cabin, her own request. She no longer returned home after sundown, and her grandmother had agreed on one condition, that she check in with the rangers every morning. The cot smelled like cedar and old paper. Her sketchbook lay open on her chest, half-finished drawing of Sage resting his hand on Theo's paw. The sound that woke her wasn't loud, but it wasn't natural either. A crack of underbrush, a faint metallic clink. Harper's eyes opened. She didn't move at first, just listened. There it was again. A second sound, like canvas brushing bark. She sat up slowly, heart already pounding, pulling on her boots. She grabbed her flashlight and crept to the window. Outside, the woods looked still, but Harper's instincts, tuned sharper after weeks near wild things, knew better. She slipped out the back door and jogged silently to Owen's quarters. Owen answered on the second knock, bleary-eyed in a thermal shirt, hand already near his belt. He studied her face for half a second, then nodded. No questions. He trusted her now, completely, together. They moved through the dark toward the enclosure, steps light, breath tight. Sage was already standing. The silverback had risen to full height, muscles rigid, nostrils flared. Behind him, 2 other troop members, Pepper and Bristle, paced nervously. Theo stirred in his sleep, sensing the unease. That's when the first flashlight beam flickered in the woods. They weren't park staff. Owen crouched beside Harper, motioning for her to stay. He pulled out his radio and pressed it once, a silent alert signal. Then he tapped a code into the portable trail camera system. Screens lit up back in the ranger station, silently streaming footage. From the edge of the clearing, 2 figures emerged. Both wore dark clothing, faces covered by balaclavas. One carried a long pole with a tranquilizer loop. The other held a gear bag that clanked as he moved. Their movements were swift, efficient. Too efficient. Owen recognized that training, former professionals. The man with the pole took point, eyes scanning, stepping into the clearing. His voice was low and sharp. "It's the cat we want. Move quick." Sage stepped forward. No sound, just presence, immovable. The man froze. "What the hell?" The second hissed, appearing behind him. "That's a..." He didn't finish, from the trees behind them. The rest of the troop emerged, silent silhouettes against the fog. They didn't charge, they didn't scream, they simply stood, blocking every path forward like shadows come to life. The lead man raised the pole. That was the last mistake he made. In one blur of motion, Sage lunged, not with violence but with purpose. He threw himself between Theo's enclosure and the approaching men. Arms wide, his roar tore through the woods. Not of rage, but of warning. The men hesitated. That half-second was enough. Owen stepped out, flashlight beam blinding and firm. "You're done." Behind him, a second beam appeared. Deputy Reed, a short, square-built man with a thick gray mustache and a steady aim. He had joined the local ranger team 3 months ago after retiring from sheriff duty. trading small-town patrol for forest peace. His no-nonsense demeanor made him gruff with strangers, but around animals. He softened in quiet ways, offering dried apple slices to Sage or reading aloud near the troop when no one watched. Hands in the air. Reed barked now, outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and caught on camera. The men surrendered. The next hour passed in a quiet flurry. Zip ties, confiscated gear, radio calls to the main station. As the poachers were led away, Sage returned to his place beside Theo. Breathing hard but calm, he looked at Harper, who had crept forward during the commotion, crouching beside Owen. She said nothing, instead. She opened her notebook. That night, she wrote her first full journal entry. They came for the ones who couldn't speak, but the forest knew. The ones with fur and long arms and soft roars, they guarded each other like family. Maybe they understand something we forgot. Trust is louder than fear. Maybe that's why Sage stood in front of Theo. Maybe that's why I stood still. In the morning, Harper read the entry to Owen in a whisper. He didn't interrupt. Later that day, her journal stayed open on the ranger station porch, a pine cone holding the page down. The last sentence read, "Some creatures are more honest than people. I'm starting to trust the ones who don't wear shoes." The morning of Theo's release broke clear and golden, as if the forest itself understood the occasion. Mist clung low over the undergrowth but didn't linger. Birds called from high branches, their songs crisp and bright against the whispering breeze. Everything felt cleaner, sharper, like a page turning on its own. Owen Barrett stood near the edge of the sanctuary's inner field, boots planted in the spring grass, one hand resting lightly on the gate of the transport crate. At 38, he had seen many animals come and go, but never one like Theo, never a tiger whose story now felt stitched into the land itself. Beside him stood Dr. Elise Rowan, her gray hair pulled back tighter than ever, clipboard in hand. A faint smile traced her sharp face as she watched Theo inside the open-air crate. The tiger had gained weight, his golden-orange fur gleaming under the sun. The bandages were gone, replaced by strong sinew and quiet pride. He paced with controlled energy, more curious than anxious, behind them. Deputy Reed adjusted the GPS tracker now attached to Theo's collar. Reed looked more relaxed than usual today. He had swapped his uniform shirt for a forest green fleece and let the mustache droop untrimmed. "This collar'll ping his location every 30 minutes, he said. "We'll know if he wanders too far." "He won't," Owen said. "I don't think he's going anywhere he doesn't already trust." Further back, near the wooden benches under a massive pine, Harper Allen held her sketchbook tightly. She wore a clean red sweater and jeans tucked into her boots. Her cheeks were pink from the morning chill, but her eyes shone with something steadier than light. Confidence. In her hands was a single drawing, protected in a plastic sleeve. She had worked on it for 3 nights straight. A full-color piece titled "The Tiger and His Friend Beneath the Pines." In it, Theo and Sage sat side by side, not touching, but close enough that the wind between them felt like memory. Sage stood beside Harper, arms folded across his chest like a sentry. The silverback had not left Theo's side once since the attack. But today, there was stillness in his posture. Not worry, acceptance. Owen gave a small nod. "Ready." Harper stepped forward and laid the drawing against the crate, just under the open gate. Theo approached it slowly. He sniffed, then nudged the corner of the paper with his nose. Then, with the grace only wild things possess, Theo stepped forward and out into the open field. The moment he did, the forest seemed to hush. He took 3 slow strides, then paused. His head turned. Sage hadn't moved. His dark eyes followed Theo, unmoving, unblinking. Theo stepped closer. 1, 2, 3 more steps, then, in one fluid motion. He bent his head and gently pressed it to Sage's chest. It lasted only a heartbeat. Then the tiger stepped back, let out a low chuff, and turned toward the trees. No one spoke as they watched him disappear into the woods, golden fur slipping between trunks like the last note of a song. Later that afternoon, Harper stood beside the chalkboard in her small classroom at the local school. The windows let in afternoon light, and the desks were full of children with wide eyes and open ears. In front of them stood Miss Kendra, a round-faced woman in her late 50s with graying curls and a warm, musical voice. She had taught in Waynesville for nearly 30 years, known for baking muffins for test days and painting birds on her classroom walls. "Class," she said, "we have a story today that's not from a book. It's from Harper." The room stilled. Harper took a breath, and then another. "My name is Harper Allen," she said, voice steady. "And I want to tell you about a tiger, and the gorilla who saved him." No one interrupted, not even the rowdy boys in the back. Every ear tilted forward, every hand stilled. She spoke of the wire, of the night, of the moment. Sage stood tall. She spoke of fruit offerings and porch shadows, of Theo resting his head against the wood. She told them of drawings and fear, and how sometimes wild things love more fiercely than we expect. When she finished, even Miss Kendra had tears in her eyes. Outside, the wind shifted through the pines, back at the sanctuary. Sage sat beneath the tree line, facing east, and somewhere, not far beyond, a golden shape moved silently through the underbrush, pausing every so often as if listening. Sometimes, the greatest miracles don't come with lightning or thunder. They come softly, through the eyes of a tiger, the silence of a gorilla, or the quiet courage of a little girl finding her voice again. In a world often divided by fear and difference, this story reminds us that love, protection, and friendship can rise from the most unexpected places. Perhaps it wasn't just instinct that made Sage shield Theo from danger. Perhaps it wasn't just coincidence that Harper heard those footsteps in the night. Perhaps, in the stillness of that Appalachian forest, God was moving through every paw, every breath, every heartbeat. There are moments in life when we, too, are called to stand between the broken and the cruel, to speak up when others are silent, to protect what cannot protect itself. And when we do, we don't just reflect kindness, we reflect the divine. So if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a little hope today. Leave a comment to tell us what part moved you most. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that reveal the quiet miracles happening every day. If you believe that God still works through the wild, through children, through the smallest acts of love, comment Amen. May He bless you, protect you, and remind you that even in the shadows, light finds a way.